Good afternoon, Team Dyess. Welcome to Shirt Talk. I'm Senior Master Sergeant Eric Seamson from the 7th EMS, and this is...
I'm a Senior Master Sergeant Regina Dawkins from the 317th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron.
So we're going to go over a few things. Eventually we'll open up to a Q&A, but we kind of just wanted you guys to get to know some of your first sergeants across the base, and we're going to start with a little bit of an intro on why we wanted to become a shirt. Regina?
Hey, so like I said, I'm Sergeant Dawkins. I've been in the military for about 21 years, mill to mill for 17 years. My husband's now retired. I've got two boys, a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I've been a shirt for about 3 years. I've always wanted to be a first sergeant. It's been one of my aspirations ever since I was a young senior airman, and I give that attribution to crusty old Master Sergeant Russ Fields from Mountain Home Air Force Base. Used to come out to the flight line and bring us hot soup, and that was the best. So I always wanted to be like him and emulate him as a first sergeant and be out there present with my airmen. So that's really why I became a first sergeant. Yeah. How about you, Eric?
Well, for me, originally from Washington State, from great old Pacific Northwest, where a lot of people don't necessarily join the military. But once I joined the military, one of the most influential people that I first experienced, other than my drill sergeant, because I did join the Army before I joined the Air Force, was my first sergeant. And it wasn't the fact that he was his demeanor was kind of look intimidating or the way he walked, but it was more along the lines of how he spoke to us soldiers and how he took care of us. And then that also resonated in each first sergeant I had thereafter. And then when I switched over to the Air Force, it was just something that I was always passionate about, and if I was ever given the opportunity, I would definitely jump on it. And so a few years back, 5 years ago, I was given the opportunity through the DSD program, and I've been hitting the road ever since. It's something that I'm passionate about, something I can continue to do. By the time I take off my diamond, which will be next year, it'll be a total of 6 years wearing the diamond. And ultimately, really, it's about airmen and taking care of airmen and being a part of what we got here at Dyess.
Awesome. Next. So a couple of things that we had kind of discussed before we got behind the camera was talking about first year troubles and how we managed our own personal self-care along with balancing our work-life harmony is what I call it, because it's definitely not a balance. Sometimes one outweighs the other. So I'd say my first year as a SHIR, I was at Moody Air Force Base, and it's something that you hit the ground running, and sometimes you end up running yourself into the ground because you want to be available for your airmen 24/7. And as a first sergeant, you kind of sometimes put yourself last. And I really felt the pressure of that probably about 6 months into it. But fortunately, I had a really good shadow program done while I was in a deployment with another AMXS first sergeant that kind of taught me how to take a knee and take time for myself, remind me that I'm still human, right? We can still have a beer every once in a while. If somebody gets arrested, you don't have to jump up and get your uniform on right away. It's going to take a few hours for them to process. So really kind of being able to take that step back and focus on, my personal life along with my work life was probably my biggest struggle in my first year.
Yeah, I agree. I think within my first couple of years, I struggled with that work-life balance for sure. Kind of watching my kids kind of grow up on a postcard, so to speak, and even still, I'm not perfect at trying to take care of myself because first and foremost, especially first sergeants of larger units, you've got people always knocking on the door, which isn't a bad thing. You definitely want to be there for your folks. You want to be there to advise your commander, be there to have those conversations with your chief. But at the same time, like for me, for instance, I'm terrible as far as getting sleep. I am a very active individual, and I can tell exactly how my body's reacting to the lack of sleep and lack of exercise, poor diet. I think that's one of the number one things that a lot of shirts kind of encounter. I would love to be a vegan through and through. However, Typically, candy bars and sodas and monsters kind of find their way into my diet plan. And so it's just trying to find that extra time for me, especially, and then and noticing when I'm at that breaking point, and just kind of pulling back. But the great thing about being a first sergeant, as it is being airman, having those great first line supervisors, is that we kind of cross check one another. There's been multiple times, Regina, that you'd be like, "Hey, Eric, you're looking a little worn down," and then of course I also have assistant first sergeant, Tech Sergeant Kelly Tompkins, and she's a good reminder that, hey, shirt, you need to eat, shirt, you need to take a break, shirt, let's get out of the office, because you will, as first sergeants, you want to be there for your folks, and you're willing, in a sense, to die for them, because you don't want to miss anything. And so I know there for the longest time, for my first few years, it took me a long time to understand that and listen to the voices of my fellow airmen. So now that I'm 5 years into it, I've bettered myself a little bit in those aspects.
With the exception of this week.
Yeah, with the exception of this week for sure. But yeah, and having that family, even mill definitely is a lot harder. You're not the first sergeant I've met that was ever mill to mill. But even so, I mean, having a family, wife and kids especially, it's really, really hard to juggle, and it's just something you got to do. Then that way, you don't look back and regret your time as a shirt.
Yeah, definitely. I really, honestly, like I said earlier, this is my last year as a shirt, and it's one of those things, that you look back and the time goes so quickly, and you always want to have a platform of what you speak about. And for me, what I talk to my airmen most about is that balance. So I think I focused on that more so I could set that example for them, to show them it's okay, to ask for help. It's okay to take a knee. It's okay to go home at 4:30, Eric. The end of the day happens.
Regina, it's okay to also go to the gym and find time for yourself.
But I don't do gym. That's not my thing. Everybody's got their decompression. My thing isn't going to the gym like most people, which sometimes is obvious. But I do good on my PT test.
You do.
I like to bake. That's my go-to. Bring me back to me.
Which she is a great baker, by the way.
What do you like to do? What's your self-care?
For me, ultimately it's exercise, and it always has been. It's kind of my kind of way to isolate, and then at times too, depending on my day, it's a 20-minute drive from here to my home, and sometimes it takes me 45 minutes to an hour, because I don't ever want to bring work home. I mean, it happens from time to time, but I definitely don't want to bring work home. So I know if I need to extend out my travel route a little bit further going home, just so I don't bring it home, and that way once I get home, I'm focused on my kids and my life.
Yeah, definitely. That's, we in our first sergeant community, we really rely on each other. We talk to each other weekly. We see each other weekly. We use each other to kind of decompress and bounce situations off on each other, because we're human. We're not perfect. We don't know everything, but we usually know where to go to find the answer. So that's definitely important.
And kind of go back earlier in the conversation too. When you mentioned the shadowing program. Of course, not every shirt gets that opportunity. Mine was short-lived, but I think 2 days, if you want to call it that. But it was something that I wish, looking back, that would have been expressed to me, as far as the care piece. Not so much, hey, this is what you do for disciplinary action, this is what you do for this, hey, just remember you're the advisor to the commander, but more along the lines of, hey, you're going to be a shirt, and being a first sergeant isn't easy, and this is what you need to do to make sure you take care of yourself. And I think, what's good here at Dyess is that within our, it's no longer a DSD program, it's all volunteer basis now, but I think we will inform those that want to be first sergeants when we sit down as senior master sergeant first sergeants in that panel, and I think we really hit that home. So yeah, we definitely, if you're wanting to become a shirt, have it be here in the next year or so, or 10 years down the line for whoever's watching. It's if you're here at Dyess, what we do is here to stay, hopefully. and we're working along the lines to really put the what we do as far as our action and taking care of people and prepping them for this position to paper, and so that way it sees it through, well beyond our diamond removal and as we go off back into our own career fields. But that's what I enjoy, and I really hope the folks that want to become shirts that sit that panel and leave there really feel that they've got everything that they need as far as the tool set and preparation for wearing the diamond.
Most definitely. And if you're out there and you're considering, volunteering through MyPERS, make sure you let your leadership know. Make sure you let your first sergeant know. We've had, today we actually did interviews for 3 new possible selections for first sergeant duty. And one of the individuals I talked to a couple weeks ago hadn't heard anything yet. And it was because there was a message that was sent to the commander that the commander hadn't replied to yet because it looked generic. It looked like an automatic message. And so all it took was me communicating that with the commander. But unless I had, stopped in the hallway and asked him the question about it, he wouldn't have gotten approved by the commander, and he wouldn't have made it on the list this go around. So if you're really looking to be a first sergeant and you volunteer through MyPERS, make sure you let your first sergeant know. Make sure your commander's aware to be looking out for that email from MyPERS. And then, the two of us are, senior shirts at our respective wings. You can definitely reach out to us with any questions that you have concerning it. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions, and most importantly, start your shadow program now. If you're talking to your commander and they're willing to let you go ahead of time, you can definitely shadow a shirt at any point in your transition.
Or even beforehand, just before you make that decision, if you want to get with any shirt, preferably your own shirt, and just say, hey, I'd just like to tag along with you for a day or two, or maybe a week, or hey, can I come to the council meeting, kind of see what's discussed, what's going on around the base, and at times, maybe you never want to be a shirt, but it helps give you that insight of development and what we do to help take care of airmen for sure. And I know the symposium's out there, but we only do that 2 times a year, and seats are limited. So if you're new to the base, or you've been here a while, but you've always wanted to go, but you don't have the time to sit through the 4-day course with the symposium, definitely reach out to a first sergeant, ask questions, or just tag along. I know I'm more than happy to have somebody come along with me. Shoot, sometimes I even have airmen. We've implemented something within our squadron that definitely I think is beneficial, and so we have airmen just attached to myself for a week or two, and then the chief and the commander to kind of get insight of what the triad is about, and what we do as far as decision making as first sergeants, as chiefs, and as commanders when it comes to airmen within our units.
Most definitely.
So, question: what is the hardest situation you've had as a first shirt, and how did you overcome it?
Ooh, that's a good one.
You want to go first?
My hardest situation stems back when I think it had only been a shirt, not even about a month, and Torque 6.2 happened. We talk about it in the academy, but you never expect it. And then you're a diamond wearer. You're still learning to be a diamond. You don't know what it means really to be a diamond, and then you have something like that tragic happen as a first sergeant, and then you gotta scramble and try to be there for your folks. You got to be there for the families. You got to be there for the commanders. You got to be that middle voice. You're working along with the chaplain, Chaplain Traeger, who's now I think he's still down in San Antonio. I mean, he and I worked really well together. Lieutenant Colonel Allen over at 317th. He was the DO at the time of 39th. He and I worked really close together, and he later became my commander. It's just something that had bonded us. And even though we were doing our best, and I know they more so than I, because as a first sergeant, you kind of take the back seat at times, and you kind of look at the whole big picture. But you definitely see it way on others, but you don't see it in yourself, even if you look in the mirror. So after it happened, I really wasn't completely done with the whole incident until probably end of February, early March the following year, and I didn't until then realize how much of an impact it had on me as a first sergeant, as a person, and it kind of sparked some hidden or underlying things within me, and and now there are resources that are out there for everybody to utilize within a Dyess Air Force Base, but what helped me the most was my peer groups as far as the first sergeant community. Chaplain Traeger, again, we saw each other through it, and then of course then my rock, my family helped me, but it took me a little bit to, like I said, see it. It was definitely hard to overcome at first, especially being the new face within the unit, and then afterwards kind of that decompress and be able to realize how much of an impact it had on me, and it took me a little while to get over, for sure. You?
I would say so. There's been a few incidents in my first sergeant tour that have defined who I am. One of the first ones I would say is more on a professional level is I was brand new. My first squadron that I had gone into, I was actually replacing a first sergeant who had been removed from that position. So I was replacing somebody who was fired. And so that commander had no faith in the first sergeant's role, period. And so I had to go in there and start from scratch, building rapport with that individual, along with building up the squadron, because the squadron took a pretty big hit when that first sergeant was removed. Fast forward about 6 months, and then I'm dealing with my squadron commander who is being berated by our group commander. And so he would come into my office every day after a staff meeting crying, not knowing what to do, and I having to sit back and listen to him and treat him as he is my airman as well, but then also having that strength to go above her level, to report the toxicity that she was doing within our unit, and within the group. And ultimately she was removed from her position as well.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, dealing with toxic leadership as a first sergeant is probably, for me, the hardest thing that I've ever had to do, because not only are you trying to keep the morale up of the unit, but you also have to, watch out for your squadron commander, watch out for your superintendent, your chief. Those two individuals don't get asked how they're doing every day. Don't get asked, hey, what do you need from me, right? They're on that position of being able to provide to their squadrons and taking care of their squadrons, and they don't always remember to take a knee for themselves. And so that was something where I think right off the bat I learned to have a voice, not only for myself as a first sergeant, but also for my commander and my superintendent, to say, hey, I can tell this is wearing on you. You need to take time. You need to take a day of leave. You need to take a knee. And sometimes it was that hard conversation that I would have to have with both of them. But ultimately, they both reach out to me afterwards and thank me for helping them keep that balance in their lives, and reminding them that they have families to go home to and take care of as well. So that's something within all of my commands that I've really worked hard to remind that squadron commander, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? How often do you ask your squadron commander how they're doing? They're always asking you how you're doing. But genuinely caring is really important to me. I've always, showed that. I am blue by nature, so that helps. But really speaking up for them and showing them that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to seek opportunities, like Eric said, for reaching out, to our helping agencies. That's really important for them to know as well. And, I've seen squadron commanders have weekly meetings with the chaplain, and I think that's awesome, for them to be able to set time apart for themselves and get that release that they need. They don't always get that. So.
One thing important with that too, as far as these agencies that you go to that provide assistance, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but there's that stigma that, you know, if you go see these folks that your career's over, and that's not the case. And or if you go see the chaplain, all they're going to do is throw religion down your throat, and that's not the case. They're there for a reason. The military's put them there to assist us as airmen through our problems, and I think that's one of the things too that we deal with on a daily basis as well, as the stressors of life and work, because just like us, you know, we struggle with that balance. And if we as senior NCOs are struggling with it, especially first sergeants, I mean, just imagine what our airmen are dealing with, or our fellow junior NCOs even. And when they try to figure out, you know, who it is they go to, you know, I mean, first thing they probably come to is us. But at the same time, you know, if you don't feel comfortable coming to a first sergeant for whatever reason, or your first sergeant's just not available, just know that those agencies are there. They're there not to be career enders. They're there for you to continue to progress through your career and deal with whatever it is that you got. So I'm a huge advocate on their behalf for sure.
One thing I really love about being at Dyess, right when I got here, they were starting up the Human Performance Cell, the HPC, on the 317th Air Wing side. So that's something I've seen go into fruition. So right in our center hallway, we've got a flight doc, we've got a psychiatrist, we've got nutrition, we've got, you know, the physical therapist, I had to think about the word. The chaplain is right there. We've got our MFLOC that's embedded in the 317th, and it makes it available. So being in the, you know, maintenance environment for us, all of our airmen are out on the line working. It gives them the opportunity that if they have a quick break, instead of having to drive all the way over onto the 7th side and go to Airmen and Family Readiness if they need to, or to the med group, right? They can go right in our center hallway and make appointments and seek help that way as well. So
Well, I know who I'm calling.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's clear that being a first steward is a difficult job. What is a reason why someone should volunteer for the job?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things.
I would say, so I'm a maintenance analyst by trade. That's my AFSC, 2R0. And this is something that we were actually talking about earlier.
Yeah, we were.
In my career field, I could have a voice for my analysts, right? And if I was working in a combined maintenance analyst and scheduling office, then the flight itself, I had a voice for them. And I could really influence and help them. Becoming a first sergeant, it helped me create a voice for myself and also the airmen around me, big A. And it didn't matter what group or what squadron or what AFSC they were. It's being able to provide them mentorship. Not only, you know, like I said, I'm mill to mill, so that's one struggle that I've been able to help airmen across the, you know, wing for. But also being invited to sit in a, you know, all women's panel with security forces, which was really amazing, you know, to sit down with all females from across the wing, inspiring and mentoring them. And that's something that I don't know that I would have the opportunity to do as a 2R. Being in this career field gives you that voice and gives you that, I don't necessarily want to call it a superpower, but it kind of is.
Yeah, a superpower that, you know, not only can you use for yourself, but like you said, a voice, right? So I think we as first sergeants, Diamond Wear first sergeants especially, you know, you could have somebody make a call over across the street and they'd be like, oh, okay. You say, well, this is first sergeant, and then it's like, so many doors open for your airmen and for yourself, and so I find that to be rewarding too.
Agreed.
That you could, you know, that diamond. It's not for abuse of power, but it's a power that could be utilized if utilized appropriately to benefit just, I mean, anybody and everybody on the installation that you are currently assigned to. So.
Most definitely. And I've had people reach out to me from, you know, across on the 7th side, from AMXS, you know, connecting with them through AFSA meetings, just being, you know, an individual there at a meeting where they found something in me that inspired them, or they're in the same line of work or whatever, that it's like it gives them an open window to come and talk to you because you have that first sergeant, insignia. So I really like that. People at the gate, I've never worked in security forces, but people at the gate, they know who I am because you're out.
Of us.
I know you're out and about, but you're getting to know everybody and know each other, and building rapport is really. And I call all of the individuals that I always call. I tell them I'm using a magic wish because we don't always get to peek behind the curtain when it comes to finance and the MPF and Airman and Family Readiness, but you build that rapport in the beginning, and it really helps airmen when it comes to, being in zero pay status, when they're not getting a paycheck and they don't know why. We've got that ability to reach back and say, hey, I need help, and get answers for them.
And pretty much sum it all up, it allows you to be that herd advocate for airmen. And that's one thing I like. And sometimes I think that's what a lot of people kind of miss, or not miss, but a lot of people misunderstand as far as what we are as first sergeants. Yeah, we're advisors to the commander, but I think a lot of stuff that isn't projected out to the masses for others to understand is that we're advocates of airmen, big A airmen, like you mentioned before. Sometimes, behind those closed doors, there's some pretty deep conversations, and sometimes it goes the way of the first sergeant, and sometimes it goes the way of the chief, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's the commander's decision, and we support it. But definitely it's pleasant. I've never had an opportunity, like you were saying, that you've had to deal with toxic leadership. I've never had that opportunity, or I want to say, let's not call it an opportunity, but I've never had that issue before. I've been very fortunate to be blessed with phenomenal commanders, and commanders that listen and understand that first sergeants are advocates, or not only advisors to them, but the advocates for airmen, and it's awesome feeling when it's like that.
I agree.
So a lot of airmen, big A, when they come to see the first shirts, because of disciplinary issues, they come with a fear that this is the end of their career, that the Article 15 or other punishments they're receiving is the end of their career. Do you have any stories, or from your experience, how often does the corrective action actually help correct someone's career, and it's not actually the end?
I have just one recent. Well, I'd say within the last, close to a year. But I had an individual who received an Article 15, and for if you were to go outside the gates of this base and deal with the civilian sector, it's not necessarily a crime to where it would constitute that level of punishment. But in the Air Force, it did. But what was impressive is when the individual, never was negative about it, understood the process. One, because I never blindside anybody who's going through anything. We go through it together, and then he was able to turn himself around. And then after a few months, we processed a request for a set aside. And this is a young airman. I mean, he's new to his career. He's still learning, but what he had done to turn himself around, and it was in the best interest of the Air Force, and so we advocated for that. And to see his face after the discussion, to let him know, hey, you had Article 15, you served your punishment, but just FYI, it's no longer a part of your record. And to see that, it's rewarding. It shows that the system works, even though there was some pushback on some portions of the process. But I think for first sergeants, that's what we do. I mean, that's why we do what we do for those type of situations. But yeah, I like. I mean, that was one of my most memorable, and I know it was also for my chief too. We were pretty excited for that.
Pretty recent.
Because less than 1% of any NJP action that goes across the commander's desk ever comes back up with a request for set aside. So it's pretty rare.
Yeah, I haven't never had one of those cases.
It was my first ever.
Really?
Yeah, it was great.
Interesting. Yeah, I would say for the majority of our admin actions, that's what they're for, right? You do an admin action, and it's to rehabilitate the airmen and help them grow and become a valuable member in the Air Force. I would say that I also recently have gone through the process of helping an airman re-enlist. However, earlier in his career, and as we all know now, senior airmen below, right, they only have that one EPR, and his enlistment was coming up. So the recommendation, was coming, and that referral EPR was sitting right there. So we had to, have a workaround. What was the workaround going to be? Well, he extended his time long enough so he could have another EPR done, and that EPR wouldn't be a referral, and he was able to re-enlist after that. So there are those opportunities where you are able to rehabilitate, but regardless of the outcome, you're always there for the airman all the way until the end, even after the fact, right? Because not all of our stories are, good, warm, filling stories. Some of them do end in our airmen becoming Misters or Misses. But I've always been assured, and I would expect most of us are probably like this, to continue following up with that airman that separates, that goes on to be a Mr. or a Mrs. Because it's not the end of the world. It's, closing the chapter of their Air Force career, and what are they going to do to move on? That's something that we're required to do by law, to sit down with the airmen and talk about what their plan is and their way forward for their future and help them prep for that. We do that through ETAP, and then sitting down with them at the end for their capstones to make sure that they're good to go. Not every story is a happy story, but it's not the end of their story.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the fact that you continue with that follow up, because I think I speak for a lot of shirts that deal with assisting people out of the Air Force for whatever reason, especially when it comes to disciplinary action. But those that are receptive and understanding of it, because you keep that open conversation throughout the process. It may not be a month down the road, 2 months down the road. It's usually several years or so down the road that you'll get that phone call or that email with words of gratitude, thanking you for actually doing what you did to get them out. And in a sense, it made them quickly grow up, pull their head out of their rear end, and kind of get a different perspective of life. And they did a complete 180, and they become product citizens of our nation, and they're still proud to serve. So, but the big thing I think when it comes to, and I just spoke with this last ALS class when we had the SURE panel, and we were talking about this stuff like the LOCs, LOAs, LORs, NJP. I think one of the key thing is when it gets to the command level, at times it's a little too late for rehabilitation. I mean, we as first sergeants, we still try to do that and advocate on their behalf to give them that opportunity. But I think it really starts at the lowest level. And the lowest level, our NCOs or our senior airmen that have been through ALS and are able to have a good understanding of the corrective tools that are out there. When people are given corrective action, I really hate to call LOCs, LOAs, and LORs punishment, because per the AFI, it's a corrective action, and you got to continue to follow up, just like we do with people that are discharged or going through harsher punishments, because it's gotten to that point. But as supervisors, we got to follow up. That's what that second paragraph within each of those forms is about. You outline, what you did wrong, you brought discredit to the unit, so on and so forth. But the meat and potatoes is the corrective action within that paragraph. And you as a supervisor, which speaks volumes to your airmen, is that you continually follow up, is showing that passion and care for folks, because no one's going to turn around, and we didn't do it as children, especially when our parents punished us. No one turns around without guidance. If there's no guidance, they're going to continue down that path. So I think, especially as supervision, and we as first sergeants, is to keep that dialogue open and continue with that follow-up for sure.
And it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many LOCs or LORs I review after the fact when it's in their PIF and tell them, unfortunately, this is not done accurately, and therefore it can't be in the PIF. There are legal ways to document these actions. So ask your first sergeant, ask your flight chief, have somebody review it. You can even send it, if you don't want us to be in the, all your business, even though we see it anyways, you can send it straight to legal, and they'll do a legal review on it. But ask for help.
And don't always MFR the heck out of it.
Yeah, honestly, I had a conversation this morning with my chief, discussing the difference between the MFR and the letter of counseling. And the biggest thing that, I would tell you, and that the legal office will probably tell you, is you have to give the member the opportunity to respond. So regardless if you put it in an MFR or an LOC or an LOR, if you don't give the member that opportunity to respond to what you're alleging, it won't be held up. If down the line we're looking at an admin separation, it'll be thrown out because you didn't give the airmen an opportunity to rehabilitate themselves.
So going to be a first cert means you have to step away from your AFSC, your career field, right? Some people might look at that as being a lot of years of experience in technical matters being lost. What do you think is the benefit to your personal development that you gain by having this job as a big A airman?
That's tough.
Yeah.
I would say even in the top 3 realm, it's hard to get professional development from our leaders. And as a first sergeant, it's even tougher because you don't want to take away opportunities from your airmen that you're serving in your squadron. We actually have this discussion quite often amongst ourselves, and with our command chiefs. Honestly, it's going to be tough, right? We're so used to dealing with the people and the people side of things that transitioning after 4 years for me and 8,000 years for you.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough to go back. And I've spoken to many, now chiefs or seniors that transitioned back to their AFSCs. That first year back and separating your focus from what the shirt's job is and now what your job is, most likely you're going into a superintendent role, and we know nothing about being superintendents. So that's where we really have to advocate, to our command chief and to our leaders about getting those courses prior to us taking our diamonds off. That's tough. That's really tough to do, to take a position for, for somebody in your unit to say, hey, I'm transitioning out, I'm taking my diamond off, I really need to go to the superintendent course. I really need to sit with the chief or the superintendent of my squadron and learn what that looks like, because when I take my diamond off, day 1, I go to my new squadron, and guess what? I'm in charge of manning and the UMD and umpers and all kinds of things that we haven't received that type of training. We haven't, been in the books of it. We know a little bit about it, right, based off of NCOA and senior NCOA a little bit, but that's just really like the educational piece. We don't actually know how to do it. So I think that's going to be the toughest thing. I know personally for me, I'm not looking forward to it, and I'm really trying to get myself into that course so I can set myself up for success.
Yeah. This is my second time out of career field in now DSD positions, but except now first sergeant isn't, but it's also my 4th time I've stepped away from my career for a period of time. And the biggest thing for me when I've gone back each and every time is understanding that I'm no longer a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
To be humble, and know that there are certain levels within your flight when it comes to the airman tier that you're going to have to rely on. Depending, for us as senior NCOs, especially as senior master sergeants, and we go back to our flights, 9 times out of 10 we're probably going to be running that flight. You just got to be humble and understand that you're no longer a first sergeant, and that when you go back, you don't need to let everybody know, because I'm sure they've record searched you and they know all about you and know what's coming, because it's kind of how ironic how that works out. But it's just to be humble and know what your limitations are, and just because you don't know it, it doesn't mean you have to take it out on others, because you still need to educate yourself, and so it is a tough transition back. but it's doable. You just got to, at times, depending on, I guess, what your career field is and how technical it is. I know for me, I sometimes procrastinate a lot. So, I kind of find myself, if I'm about 12 months out, I'm reaching back to my career field and saying, hey, can you send me some stuff? And I need to re-educate myself on the processes of being POL. So, and which I'm coming close, just like you guys are. I know there are a lot of first sergeants here on Dyess that next year is kind of their last year, and diamonds will be coming off. But it is a hard process. But like I said, it's doable.
So final question. So a lot of the airmen's issues that you guys deal with, the majority of your workload, can be mitigated by the actions of NCOs and lower tiers, as you alluded to.
Mm-hmm.
So since the point of this is to provide professional development to Dyess airmen and any other airmen, what would you ask of the lower level NCOs, staff sergeant, tech sergeants to do? What advice would you have to help avoid the problems in the first place?
You want me to go first? I got it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Because we've had this discussion too. Yeah.
My biggest thing, and anytime I have an airman come in my office, I'm like, okay, I don't mind listening to you. I just need to know, does your supervisor know what's going on? Because 9 times out of 10, they don't, right? I have an open door policy, as most shirts do, which sometimes gets us in a little bit of a pickle, right? Mm-hmm. So does your supervisor know? If they don't know, that's fine, but I'm going to challenge them after they see me to go and talk to their supervisor. Supervisors have got to be intrusive in their airmen's lives. I get that you're working late. I get that you've got probably 30 people that you're taking care of, right? We're right there with you. If you don't know your airmen, they will never come to you when they need to come to you. So the intrusiveness is really important. And secondly, you need to have empathy. If you can't empathize with your airmen and understand where they're coming from, you won't gain their trust and you won't gain their respect as an NCO by just shutting them down. You have to empathize with how they're feeling in that moment. To them, that's the biggest, event that's happened in their lives. To them, it's a huge deal. And if you, fluff it off, or it's not a huge deal to you and you just tell them to suck it up, buttercup, and get back to work, they'll never come back to you. You've got to empathize with them and how they're feeling and know that just because you may see it as a small problem, to them it's the largest problem of their life. And it's the one thing that's consuming them.
I really have nothing to piggyback on that one because you're spot on. So I know for me, just to add a little bit, I guess in a sense, piggyback. But
you could do it.
I'll try to do my best without repeating some of the stuff that you already said. But one of the things that we do, and I've found it now starting to resonate within my senior NCOs and even junior NCOs, is that within EMS we try our best, depending on the situation, but we try our best to keep every level of supervision a part of the decision-making process. And separate of that, I know flights within EMS, they do PD courses, and some of the stuff that they've done in the past, now that luckily COVID is starting to allow folks coming back, that these courses will start to come back up, and we can get back at it like we were once before. But a couple times they've reached out to me as a first sergeant, especially to teach those types of PD courses, and maybe that's just something that we need to do in some flights or in some sections across this base, across our Air Forces, just as NCOs, kind of lean on your more senior NCOs to kind of get that insight of, hey, I want to put this on, one, for my benefit, and then two, how to help educate my airmen in the processes and procedures of what we need to go through to make sure that we're all progressing career-wise as the years go by. So it's that intrusive leadership that you speak of, so definitely.
And I would say, just to kind of wrap things up a little, if you have a professional development that you are really passionate about and you need money for it and you just don't know who to go to your first sergeant. Reach out to them. They have the connections, of who to go to put these things together. Both wings have money set aside for professional development. And right now in this time through COVID-19, the money is there and it's not costing as much because we're not sending anybody out and we're not bringing anybody in, but we're buying certificates and we're buying online training. So if you've got an idea, let your shirt know. So they can bring it to the table and we can put it together. I would say I'm actually putting together a professional development online. It's an 8-week course that I've been working with the wing to get paid for Team Dyess. And it was really selfishness out of me that I wanted to go to the training, and I thought, well, let me give the opportunity to the whole wing and see how many people I can get to sign up. But it was awesome to get them on board.
Well, I think that wraps it up, like Senior Master Sergeant Doc has alluded to. So, Team Dyess, thanks for taking the time and listening to some old shirts talk. Hopefully, we hear from you in the future with many more questions and help kind of lead that development as airmen, NCOs, or senior NCOs. So, thanks for tuning in.
Happy Friday!
I have a question.
Yeah, well, you came late.
This production was brought to you by the Dyess Top 3. We broadcast at 1500 on every Friday. Have a great day.